Welcome to the Lentil Intervention Podcast, talking all things movement, whole food nutrition and environmental wellness with your hosts, Ben and Emma.
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 15. Emma? Is that what we're on?
Yes, Ben, episode 15.
We were actually having a debate offline as to whether we call this an episode. Anyway, this is a snippet or a Lentil Express or a show out of the can. It's quick, short. We want to first start off by saying a small apology. We're conscious that it's been almost exactly a month since our last episode. We haven't given up. We haven't packed up. We haven't gone anywhere. Quite the contrary. Emma, we've been super busy.
We've been busy little bees behind the scenes. So I know you've been really busy travelling with work, Ben, with all your freedom that you've had in New Zealand. Until recently. But behind the scenes, we've been busy putting together a website. We've got some new ideas that we want to put out into the world. So thank you for sticking with us.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about the website. So I think, we've had an incredible amount of feedback, good feedback, positive feedback from our last episode with Gerard. And, even you and I, post that last episode, we had a bit of a reflection on that show and, I guess a culmination of a lot of environmental related conversations. And it's really made us rethink a few little things as to where we think the focus should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to say it resonated with a lot of people, and this is an area that I know both of us have been really passionate about for quite some time. So we want to bring you more of the environmental wellness aspect and actually put together some resources that will help people and some, actionable items that people can actually do, because it's really great to raise awareness about these issues. But as you say, Ben, that alone doesn't lead to change. So we want to actually help facilitate change here. And that's what the website is for.
And look, I mean, as passionate as both of us have been about the environment, there's a lot we've learned from these last few episodes ourselves. And I've gone on and purchased, I think, 3 books online now, some good environmental / how food impacts or what we eat impacts the environment, to educate myself further. But that's right. The website is, I guess, our next stage. We were never going to remain just as a podcast. We want to create a platform to create awareness, and not just awareness, but actually take action. So we've put the first, I guess, go at a website. We've had some debates of what the colours should be, where things should go, and that website's going to continue to grow and evolve. But as a start, like you say, I think we've had some fantastic guests, and there's always some really good resources that come directly from them. And Facebook is just not fantastic for sharing that. So having a website where you can go and download a manual or some tips or tools, you want to have a debate or conversation with someone else, well, here's the resources to do it, help yourself educate. And look, before we carry on too far with the environment, we're not moving away from our other, what we call our pillars of health. We're still certainly focusing on nutrition. It's still a very important component, and movement as well. But what we realized is you can focus as much as you want on being as healthy as you can be, but there's no point if there's not much of a planet left in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years time the line. So there's a balance, and we want to bring a connection to that, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where are we now? So we haven't really planned for this, and that's the point. So it's been a month. We're conscious that we've kind of lost touch a little bit with our amazing audience, which is yourselves. So in the interim, we haven't stopped reaching out to some new guests, and in fact, we've got some very exciting guests coming up. But just like us, they seem to be super busy as well, and some are overseas, so getting time zones aligned and so on. So what we've decided, as we said at the start of the show, we're going to do these short little snippets to kind of fill the gap so that we don't disappear for a month at a time. We'll get back to some kind of continuity with our episodes, so they're a bit more regular again. So what we call them doesn't matter, but what we'll base them on is a current topic. So if a paper has just recently been published, or if there's a newspaper that Emma has read that has really wound her up, a particular article, then we'll talk about that.
Like today.
Like today. And actually, it's very timely. This particular article was published 3 days ago, the 17th of August. Or actually, I got my days wrong, 5 days ago now. And today is Happy Plant-Based Milk Day. Is that what it is?
Yep. It's World Plant Milk Day today.
That's what it is. So, look, what bee is under your bonnet, Emma?
Okay. Well, it was very convenient timing, may I just say, for the release of this into the world. So there was a report from the Sustainable Food Trust published just a few days ago, advising people basically to stop drinking soy milk in order to save the rainforest. They were claiming that milk from grass-fed cattle is better for a sustainable planet. Now, this did the rounds of all the news outlets here in Australia. It lit up my Facebook feed. As the listeners are aware, I live in cattle country, so I saw this posted a lot by dairy farmers in the area. But it piqued my interest because this is basically the exact opposite of everything I've read on the various milks and environmental impact to date. So I tracked down the study and, actually had to read through the scientific paper rather than just all the news articles.
And whilst it did its rounds in Australia, I mean, I'm looking at the Mail Online, which is out of the US. There's, what's this website here? Financial Review. So not just Australia, but I would say globally. This is titled Soy Milk Will Cost the Earth, Vegans Warned. What's another title? Milk from cows fed on grass is better for the environment than drinking milk made from soybeans. So, yeah, Emma.
Yeah, it's quite a hook. It was quite a clickbaity kind of headline in all of these articles. Look, but the actual paper, I will give it some credit. It does make some good points. I mean, there definitely is widespread concern about increasing global production of soybeans and its impact on deforestation and loss of habitat, especially in the Amazon. But it really misses the mark on a few important things. So I'm just going to unpack that a little bit. So firstly, I want to set the scene for this paper because it's an important point. This was a UK study. And in the UK, the vast majority of cows actually roam on pastures and they're grass-fed. So soy only makes up a small percentage of their diet. But we can't extrapolate that to the other 1.5 billion head of cattle on the planet. So not every country have these grassy pastures available, nor do they have the space for grazing like that. So soy and grain feature much more heavily in cattle in some other countries in the world. And this wasn't factored into their calculations, okay? So this was UK specific. So just keep that in mind. Now, the calculations, they really made no sense to me because they don't actually take into account that soy is only quite a small part of the diet for the UK cattle. But obviously, it's the main ingredient in soy milk, right? So, of course, it makes sense to say that a glass of soy milk would use more soybeans than a glass of dairy milk taken from a cow that's fed hardly any soy. Like, that's a no-brainer. And we needed to have a discussion around the climate impact of the rest of the cow's diet too, as well as the methane and the nitrogen they produce and the water needed for dairy and the waste that ends up in the waterway and, the antibiotic use in a lot of these farm animals. There's so much more to the discussion here that wasn't factored into the calculations. And I actually find that it's a bit disingenuous to, exclude all of those things. I'll rant on if you don't want to input anything here because there's a few other things I do want to say.
No, I mean, carry on. It's and one of the resources. And look, if you're wondering where we're getting some of these figures from, we have already on our website a fantastic resource that actually is linked to an upcoming guest, but one of the figures that 80% of the world's soybean crop, 80% is fed to livestock. So if not to the UK, certainly to other parts of the world. And we're talking about beef, chicken, egg, and dairy production. So that's a massive disconnect there, that sure, if we all stopped drinking dairy milk, we wouldn't have to grow 80% of the soybean. In fact, well, okay, maybe, the figures would be worked out differently, but we certainly wouldn't be growing as much soy.
Yeah, well, actually, globally, only about 6% of soy is grown for human consumption. And they don't mention that. And in the Amazon, like 80% of that clearing is linked back to the livestock, whether it be feed or for the actual, like, grazing land for cattle. And it's just not mentioned. So it's just ridiculous. And, soy that is grown for human consumption, generally, they're held to a higher standard. So I know, at least here in Australia, a lot of them grow their beans locally. I jumped on a few of the companies' websites to take a look at this. Vitasoy, for example, their farms here on the East Coast, they're established farms. They're not cutting down Amazonian rainforest to produce their soy milk.
Or any of the native forests north of Queensland, which we covered in the last episode.
Yes, absolutely. So if anyone is interested and hasn't listened to our very last episode with Jared, please take a listen. The land clearing rates in Queensland because of the livestock industry are just phenomenal. But yeah, it's a really short-sighted study because reducing our impact on the earth needs to go a lot further than just addressing soy's role in deforestation in the Amazon. So for every 100 calories of grain fed to farm animals, you only get back about 40 calories of milk. Beef, it's even worse. You're only getting about 3 calories there. So it's an extremely inefficient way to produce food.
And when you also look at the water usage, there's an incredible amount comparative to soy. I think soy, when you compare even other plant-based milks, almond, rice and almond are actually quite water heavy compared to, still nothing compared to dairy, it's still less than half. But soy, in comparison to all the other alternatives, even oat milk, uses the least amount of water.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of factors you got to take into account.
Yeah. But after reading through this study, I'm actually at the stage where I think the authors should consider publishing a correction because I think their conclusions are pretty dodgy, in my opinion anyway. And the fact that they've tried to put these conclusions out into the world and all the news outlets have spun it as soy being worse for the environment than dairy milk. And can I just mention that the organisation was founded by a dairy farmer, and the two authors of the paper also have ties to the dairy and livestock industries, but didn't disclose any conflicts of interest on the paper. So that just leaves a pretty bad taste.
And what is one of the first things you learn about, sort of identifying the genuineness of a study is who's behind it, who's funding it. So, and you know what, I'm going to bring something else up, which is very close to home for me. And a lot of our listeners that live in the Auckland region of New Zealand, as we know, we've been under water restrictions since the start of lockdown, the first lockdown, so around March early this year. So it's been quite a few months now. Water restrictions, so nothing too drastic, but making an effort to shorten our showers, but certainly no car washing. Watering your gardens and businesses. So rental car agencies can't wash their cars. You can't go through a car wash, water blasting companies and so on. So a lot of restrictions. And it hasn't improved. And they're now talking about this upcoming summer, if things are continuing to deteriorate, then they might be shutting the taps off even. Now, I see in the paper today, so very timely, this conversation, a newspaper article titled, now before I get on to that, a little backstory. So the Auckland Council has been making applications to draw more water from the Waikato River. And the application is part of ownership of the Waikato River, so it's a local iwi, and there's a whole process around that. And they're fighting for it. And apparently there's a long list of applications, and Auckland Council is kind of sitting down the bottom of that list. Now you wonder, well, who else is applying? Farmers. And this is the title I read in a newspaper today. 2 large dairy farms want to take enough water from the Waikato River to supply nearly half the population of Auckland. So you've got 2 dairy farms. Again, we're talking about impact on our environment, on the planet. You've got a population, Auckland population of about 1.6 million residents, which includes 30,000 farmers, tens of thousands of businesses, and you've got 2 dairy farms in the Waikato area that will draw almost half of what we all need collectively, including businesses. Never mind, when you compare the runoff, the effect of runoff from dairy farming, the water quality, eutrophication of the rivers, the long list goes on, and we've covered this with Dr. Mike Joy, for instance, as well. So it really makes you think where the decisions are coming from, who's behind it, how political is it, and how much is it driven by pure greed, profit.
Yeah.
2 dairy farms for the sake of exporting to other countries, and let the rest of us have to change the way we live by not having clean drinking water when we want it. So infuriating.
Yeah. Infuriating and a bit depressing. But I suppose, given that it's World Plant Milk Day, perfect opportunity to try plant milk.
100%.
Doesn't have to be soy if you don't like soy. Oat's pretty environmentally sustainable as well. There's almond milk. I'm not a huge fan of rice milk, but there's options there if you want them.
Look, I mean, if anyone that has attended any nutrition workshop that I've delivered, know I'm a big fan of soy for various reasons. One, it's a legume. It's a health food. It's good protein ratio. It's calorie dense, but it doesn't have a high saturated fat content like, say, coconut milk, for instance. Also, it's one of the very few powders or milks you can get as a powder, and that's what I'm a big fan of. So you mentioned the Bonfit brand. That does the soy milk out of Australia, GMO-free soybeans. That's quite important. And you're buying a powder that's 100% soy. Whereas if you buy a lot of the cartoned milks, which if you're trying to move away from dairy, great. It's a great way to get yourself drinking an alternative. But then once you've already gone down that path, start reading the carton and start realizing that, let's say, almond milk, it's maybe, you're lucky if it's 3% almonds in there. And then there's a whole lot of other additives as well. Never mind the water, but there's a popular one is brown rice syrup or brown rice, I don't know what. That's basically the sweetener. There's anticoagulants. There's all sorts of other stuff as well. So once you've gone down the path and definitely off dairy and enjoying a plant-based milk of your choice, then start being a little more selective as well with what you are actually consuming, from a health perspective, of course. But
I mean, from a health perspective, I'll admit I still use the carton milk from time to time. I've got a machine that I can buzz up my own milks in if I'm making homemade. But the things that I would recommend looking out for, number one is minimal ingredients if you can get it. If you're getting a soy milk, go for a soy milk that's made on the whole beans. Try and get one that's unsweetened. And for people who potentially don't eat enough beans and greens and calcium-rich alternatives, I'm fine with them having a calcium-fortified milk, because really you're only using a dash here, a dash there anyway. It's not like I'm going to be recommending people guzzle down glasses upon glasses each day. As long as you're getting like a reasonable quality one. I also don't have a problem with almond milk for most adults, as long as it's unsweetened. And again, like the oil-free ones if you can.
I was going to say, a lot of the cheaper brands have got the oil, so spend an extra 50 cents and you're getting a better quality.
Yeah, and the same with your soy milks. A lot of the cheaper soy milks made on soy protein isolate, which I wouldn't recommend. So go for the whole, soybean based milk.
Protein isolates is a different conversation, which we'll do on another day. But Yeah, so I think what's the outtake after all this? I think A is be aware of what you read online, especially, and do your research and move away from dairy if that's a key outtake. So yeah, so hopefully learned something, but like we've said, get onto our website, the Lentil. Oh, we haven't said where it's at. The lentilintervention.org. That's the website. We'll put a link in the show notes on Facebook and Instagram, and but also we've updated the various podcasting platforms. So if you go on there, then the updated contact details are there, so you can reach us. We're also starting up a mailing list, so make sure you sign up. We're not promising a weekly mail out, but if we've got some special announcements to make or anything like that, then being on the mail list, you'll be the first to know. Anything else for now, Em, before we
I think that's all.
Finish off the website?
Everyone, finish off the website really quickly before this goes live, so it might be a late night tonight. But everyone, enjoy World Plant Milk Day, and thank you for sticking with us, and we'll be talking to you again really soon.
Awesome. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Lentil Intervention podcast. If you found this interesting, make sure you subscribe and share it with your friends.